It is shocking to see so many aircraft on the ground. When you see the images, that was never seen in the aviation industry before.
This is what $40 million going down the drain looks like. Each week, Qantas remains grounded.
We generally follow really good, tight guidelines, very clear guidelines on how to store and keep the aircraft in what they call an airworthy condition.
Aviation has arguably been the most affected industry in the coronavirus shutdown, but engineers are now making sure the fleet is ready to fly again. Australia is beginning to thaw. The coronavirus crisis had effectively frozen some of the giants of our industry and culture. Now, the industries which underpinned daily Australian life just 3 months ago are starting to look ahead to life after lockdown. What has been the impact of the COVID-19 crisis to the aviation industry in Australia?
Well, it's been devastating. It's been devastating worldwide. When you look at Qantas today, we're operating 1% of our international network before COVID-19, 5% of our domestic network. We've grounded 220 aircraft. We have 25,000 people stood down. That is horrible. It's terrible for our people. It's terrible for the economy. It's terrible for Australia.
The concern would be, I think, if there are individuals who are infected, that they may put infected secretions onto the seats of the aircraft, or particularly where people might congregate if they're using the facilities.
There's been no known transmission of COVID-19 passenger to passenger or passenger to crew, and there's huge tracking being done on that in this country.
If social distancing practices will remain in place, is running an airline and running certain routes within this country profitable?
There are other protections that we think we can do that allows people to have absolute surety that it's safe to travel on airlines.
So would you be asking the federal government that these social distancing guidelines don't apply to airlines?
We have to make that case to the government, and we have to show, as we have done with these charters coming in from India, from London, from LA, which we don't have social distancing on board but have a lot of other protections. We have to show that they will apply to domestic. No conclusions have been reached.
While the future of Qantas's main competitor Virgin hangs in the balance since going into administration, flight paths for Qantas are already beginning to take shape.
The way we see the markets opening up is obviously domestic Australia will be first, and then people will know that COVID-19 is under control here in Australia. The first international market that'll probably open up will be New Zealand, and then we're probably going to see these bubbles happen on countries where people are comfortable. We think for some time our biggest competitor will be COVID-19.
Tourism accounts for more than $60 billion of GDP. $44 billion of that is international tourists who won't be returning anytime soon.
International tourists make up a big proportion of our market that will have a significant impact.
That's why tourism operators, like the iconic Sydney Harbour Bridge climb, are sharpening their sell to a new breed of interstate tourists.
We hope that we're able to start up and we can engage with that domestic market. And so our team is out on the bridge creating new content for social media.
Keep rolling. How tall is the Sydney Harbour Bridge?
Clearly tourism has been disrupted. We're going to see a focus on domestic tourism in the short term as our international borders are restricted in many ways. That provides new opportunities for domestic operators.
You can see the blue mountains all the way out in the distance. How good's that?
For the economy at large, there is a glimmer of hope. In new economic modelling obtained exclusively by 730, Australia could return to our pre-COVID-19 levels of GDP in just 2 years' time, if our leaders make the right choices now, according to consulting firm PwC.
There's two pathways. One is a pro-growth agenda, where we double down on the things that we've done well recently, the things that we've actually maybe surprised us in the COVID-19 response. Being agile, investing into tax reform, smarter regulation, industrial relations reform, digital adoption. If we do that, we can grow and we can get back to where we would have been. The alternative is a more insular view of the world, a fortress Australia, where we cut immigration because we want to protect Australian jobs.
The modelling says if we adopt a Fortress Australia footing, an isolationist economy would be $49 billion smaller by 2030. But if we adopt a growing and open Enterprise Australia setting, by 2030 the economy is $7.4 billion larger than it otherwise would have been.
It's the same as coming out of World War II, significant government debt out of World War II. That was never paid back in any fast way. It was paid back by growing the economy, and the debt became less significant as a percentage of the economy.
As retailers start to reopen, I think we'll see a different world. I think there's no doubt it can be managed.
One $325 billion industry is now beginning to reopen, led by retail veteran Paul Zara. Has COVID now effectively been the death of retail in this country?
Oh, it's certainly not the death of retail. So I think what's happening over the next 10 years from a digital transformation point of view, we'll see now in the next 2.
Even though COVID-19 has boosted online buying to 20% of all sales, 80% of people will still walk into stores when this is all over.
So the retailers I'm talking to are talking about things like allowing customers to make an appointment so they can come into the store at a particular time so they can control the intake. Personal shopping, concierge services, curbside assist, click and collect, which I've mentioned. There's a variety or a suite of initiatives that retailers can employ.
Hardest hit amongst them, and trickiest to reopen, are clothing and footwear stores.
Well, all of a sudden now, in this new COVID-19 safe world, you either got to disinfect the fitting room after each customer, or you close the fitting room. The customer has to buy the item by choosing their size and then return the product. When the product does come back, we'll have to disinfect it.
Double-edged sword is a really good expression for the dilemma we find ourselves. If we suddenly let things relax and infection comes back and there's a kind of overshoot of the epidemic curve, then we're in more difficulties than we were.
I started cooking because of, one, I love cooking food, but I love watching somebody eat the food that I've cooked. It'll be wonderful to see restaurants full again. We're all trying to just hold on at the moment. We're all gritting our teeth.
For chef Josh Nyland, the fear is reopening his award-winning Sydney restaurant and taking back staff, only for a second wave to force him to close again.
The day that I shut this place and had to have all of those conversations with the staff was torture. How do we pour a bottle of water now? Do we pour your wine, or do we leave the wine there for you to pour? Do we take your order in front of you, face to face, or do we stand behind perspex and look through? I don't know, it's a horrible thing to think about, that we would end up eating, our beautiful food with bamboo cutlery. But, all these things, they're all considerations now. St. Peter won't be the same restaurant that it was.
Under the government's new timetable, his restaurant will only be able to seat 10 people at a time, and that's not enough to pay wages and rent.
Now everything's on the table. It's an opportunity now for us to kind of reboot and re-establish, the industry in a positive way.
Comedian and presenter Tim Ross says some things have changed forever.
So will we hug again? Of course. Will we shake hands? With friends, perhaps? But we may fall out of the habit. You watch TV now and people shake hands, you go, ooh, what are they doing that for? That's disgusting.
Like many Australian artists, his live stage show was cancelled during the crisis.
And so we lose a generation of artists because they're just too far behind. I think there's a generation of politicians who are lucky enough to grow up with their stories on screen, their songs represented on the radio, and that may not happen for the next.
For life after lockdown, the tension between protecting Australians' health versus their lifestyles won't be resolved by the government's deadline to fully reopen the country by July. Who are you most looking forward to reconnecting with when this is over?
Probably family.
Well, at the moment I can't see my grandkids.
And I have some family back in Ireland, particularly my mother.
I don't want to see anyone ever again. I've got used to it.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 7:30's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.